This program is brought to you in part by Cedar Ridge Paving and Milling, commercial and residential work. Yes, welcome to the Race in Action Today Talk Series. We're here today with a very special guest as part 2 of our original real estate attorney, Emanuel Mangiafico, good friend. And I have to say, Manny, it's been a very interesting talk about what you do. And I'm sure that real estate gets involved in more than just selling houses, correct? You will get involved in commercial activity and some other things. Now tell me, what is the main difference in these different types of things?
Well, thanks for having me back, Larry, and always a pleasure to see you. The last time we were here, we talked about the residential real estate, and the commercial real estate is very different. The attorneys are more involved in the commercial real estate, and there's a lot more going on.
Yes.
They take a lot more time. You're not closing a real estate transaction that's commercial in 45 days. I've had them take as long as 18 months sometimes to get them closed.
Well, I will say this, Manny, being a real estate broker and handling commercial things, it seemed like a load off my back when their attorneys are involved, because they're the ones doing the contract and all the in-between, right?
Yes, in a typical commercial transaction, the realtor will draft up what's called a letter of intent, an LOI.
Yes.
That's going to have the main points that are going to be contained in the contract: the purchase price, the general closing date, how much the deposit's going to be. But then you hand that off to the attorneys, who are going to draft a very technical commercial contract.
Mm-hmm. Now, in the commercial arena, you have somebody who is a buyer, let's say a buyer. Now he's got to go do a letter of intent. So he gets the lawyer involved right away, right?
That's right. The lawyer should be involved from day one.
Even though there's a realtor maybe involved, the lawyer is involved right away, right?
The lawyer is going to be involved right from the beginning of a commercial real estate transaction.
Now, with a commercial transaction, do you have the same process? Like, is there an inspection that have to be done? Is there any kind of environmental testing that have to be done? What is the procedure here?
The commercial transaction is a lot more technical. There's a lot more inspections, and the banks are a lot more detailed and require a lot more information in order to approve the loan. So one thing you mentioned was, is there an environmental inspection? Anytime a bank is involved, they're going to require the buyer to perform at a minimum what's called a phase 1 environmental inspection.
That's correct.
A phase 1 environmental inspection, also called a search of the records, we'll say, where an environmental expert gets hired. The attorney doesn't do it. It's done by an environmental company. They go and search the DEEP, the town hall records, and they see if
any flags.
If the property was ever used for an auto body, a mechanic shop, a laundromat, if there were ever any spills that were reported on the property. And if that is the case, then that would trigger more testing to be done.
So now you have phase 1. So when you go to beyond, Then you phase 2.
A phase 2 is only required if the phase 1 reveals any information that signifies further testing is going to be required, and the environmental expert would make that determination.
So, but there has to be some kind of a red flag here, right, to go to phase 2.
Correct. The red flag would be, was there an auto body? Was there a gas station? Was it a mechanic shop? Was it a laundromat? Was there a spill ever on the property? And if any of that happened, then the environmental expert would say, we need a phase 2. The phase 2 is the testing phase.
Okay, so they'll go in and test. Now, in some cases, Manny, during my procedures, I've had different commercial deals. They come up with a scenario, they didn't like something and they'll want to remediate it or something. Like they have these special things that'll send, translate air into the atmosphere or whatever.
So depending on the type of contamination that's found, there's different procedures.
Yeah.
But the phase 2, what happens is it's more testing. So they drill holes, they get soil samples. If there's water flowing through the property, rainwater, they collect water and they see what it reveals.
Now, this is not a one-time affair. Sometimes they have to go back and test this thing every week or two. Right? That's
correct. They do a series of testing depending on what they find. The testing can last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days.
Yeah.
I've seen testing that has to continue up to 2 or 3 years.
Oh, wow. Now, if it has to continue like that, they can't sell the property?
Well, they can.
Is there contingency?
So what would happen is if the buyer does their testing, we find out that it's contaminated, then the environmental company comes up with a phase 3. The phase 3 is a monitoring and remediation plan.
Okay.
Let's say that the remediation company says it's going to cost $100,000 to remediate and then monitor. Okay. Well, the seller, if they want to continue on with the process, would put money in escrow. So we can still close, money's being held at the closing to finish off all the environmentals.
Okay. So that's how it's handled. The money is put aside and just in the event to make sure everything is paid for. And at some point though, so in a case like that, there's no real, fine, you're all done. It's all set.
You're never done.
No,
you're never, because
that's what I'm saying.
When you go to sell the property again, then depending on what the seller did, any buyer is going to have another phase 1 done. Bank may require them to retest to make sure there's no contamination, and it can occur a second time.
Cool. Okay.
And it depends on what kind of activity the buyer is doing during the process that they own the property.
Yeah. One thing, Manny, that I didn't ask you when we were talking about residential and commercial, do you have a fiduciary duty to people?
Of course. So my fiduciary duty is to my client.
That's right.
Meaning I have to try to look out for the best interest of my client.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Am I thinking right?
Well, what happens between the client and the attorney stays between the client and the attorney.
All right. Yeah, I forgot to ask that.
We have a confidentiality requirement.
Yeah, that's very important.
And a privacy policy.
When it comes to real estate, that's a very important thing, So now, Manny, we got this environmental squared away, inspection, whatever. We talked about you have to negotiate if there's things you don't like.
Inspections on a commercial property are going to be a lot more stringent than on a residential property.
And they're very expensive too.
Where on a residential property you may pay $600 or $700 for an inspection. I've seen inspections on commercial properties, $25,000.
Oh my dear! Yeah. Wow.
Not all of them. Depends on what you're buying, but they can get very costly.
So now we get that squared away, and then of course after that, or during, the money's got to come into the picture. Is it cash money or is it going to be a mortgage, right?
Well, that depends on the buyer. A lot of times, buyers will get financing from a bank, from an institution.
Yeah.
And it's a very different process getting a commercial loan versus a residential loan, because now we're dealing with companies, LLCs. So you can own the LLC, but you got to produce all of the financials for the LLC.
Okay. All right. So it could be very involved then as far as when getting a mortgage.
Very involved with a commercial mortgage.
Now, would you say if somebody buying a building or a property, is there a percentage that the bank would like to have a mortgage on, or no?
There is.
Okay.
So most conventional commercial mortgages, lenders will loan up to 80%.
Okay.
So as a buyer, you got to be prepared to put 20% down.
Okay.
And some lenders will only do 70 or 75%, depending on the program you're in.
Yeah. So usually the bank will go along with 80% is the norm.
Unless you're going with an SBA loan, that's a totally different product, but they'll lend up to 90% to an owner that's going to occupy the building.
Oh, okay. All right.
So if you're buying a building to put your own business in there, you can get up to 90%.
Now, with with the small business loan, is the rate different?
Well, the rates are always different depending on the programs you're in. So the rates are generally better on the SBA loans.
Okay, they are better.
Generally.
Generally, yeah. So now, would you say, Manny, that when you're going through the process with a commercial deal, is the bank involved right away, or is that waited until the inspections are squared away?
No, the bank is involved right away
Right away.
because you need to go to a bank first
Yep.
and make sure that your company, if you're buying it under your company, is going to qualify
Yep.
for that loan before you go make an offer on a building.
Yeah. So they're right away they're involved, right?
They are.
So now we got the mortgage, same deal. We got to get a commitment, right? And then they have to get ready to make a closing. When you make a closing for a commercial deal, Manny, is there anything special, kind of different? I mean, title insurance or?
Well, no, you're still going to get title insurance. Title insurance,
okay.
it's going to have a couple of different aspects to it.
Yep.
There's different endorsements. You might have a variable rate endorsement or a survey endorsement, depending, because commercial properties are a little different than residential. You're not getting just a standard owner's policy, depending on the bank and the bank requirements as well.
Now, the other question I have, when we talk about money, then you have situation where the seller is holding the loan. And that's a different animal too. How's that all?
Well, that's a totally different. There's no bank involved.
Yep.
The seller says, "Hey, Larry, you want to buy my building? You give me 20% down. I'll hold the note on 80% for 10 or 15 years, depending on what they agree."
So now, who writes that contract up? As far as like you talked about, is the attorney?
The attorneys will write those contracts, and they'll write the note and the mortgage up as well.
Okay, all right. And of course, the rate there could be anything. That's wide open.
On a commercial loan, the rates are not subject to FHA guidelines, federal guidelines. So they can charge you whatever they want.
Yeah.
And if it's a seller financing, they can charge whatever they want on a commercial deal, as long as the buyer's willing to pay it.
Now, in the scheme of things, Manny, would you say a buyer is better off getting owner financing?
A lot of times, a buyer is better off getting owner financing so long as the interest rate is reasonable, because you're going to avoid a commercial appraisal, which can be $5,000.
Yep.
Commercial underwriting guidelines, which could be very detailed, and you got to produce a lot of information. And there's a lot of bank fees involved with commercial financing.
Now, when you have that kind of scenario where the owner is going to hold the mortgage, is the environmental inspection handled the same way?
So what I've seen over the years is buyers are willing to not do the environmental inspections because the seller is giving them the financing. I always tell the buyer, that's not a good idea. You should still do all the same environmental inspections.
Because of the cost of doing it.
Well, once you're the owner of the building or the piece of property, you become responsible for any environmentals. So if someday you go to sell it, you might be on the hook for the cleanup, which could be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh, we've seen horror stories, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
You know, during my time selling real estate in commercial property, I mean, anything could happen.
I did a commercial closing for $1,200,000. The seller spent $500,000 in cleanup.
Oh my dear! Wow, we're in the wrong business. So now it's time to close. You got your commercial inspection squared away. Money's all set. Do you have a certain time period you wait to close or no?
Generally not.
Try to close.
Try to close as soon as possible.
Quick as possible.
Yeah, most people want to close as quick as they can.
Okay, so now, boom, the closing happens. Your duty after the closing, what is your duty?
Well, my duty, I maintain the file in my office for the buyer.
For a certain amount of time,
Well,
too.
7 years is the minimum.
Okay, all right.
And if something comes up, we have to make sure that the seller recorded the releases for their mortgages at the town hall. We have to, of course, after the closing, send the deed and the mortgage for recording at the town hall.
So now, usually the paralegal will take care of that?
The paralegal will prepare the file for recording.
Yeah. And then it's taken there and it has to be, right, filed.
It's taken to the town clerk.
Yep.
And it's filed on the land records, the deed first, and then any mortgages after that.
Have you ever run into a problem with somehow it didn't get done right or something?
I have run into problems where someone will have a mortgage, but it was never recorded because the bank never recorded it, or somebody sends in a deed and for some reason it gets misfiled, meaning the town clerk spells their name incorrectly, so it's hard to find.
Yeah.
So there are errors that occur.
I mean, it could happen, right?
Could happen.
Yeah.
And that's why you get title insurance.
Yeah, well, I know there's a reason to get it. I just thought it was very odd, Manny. In all the years that I've done this, I had one person did not get it.
Yeah.
Which I didn't even know. I didn't think you could get it, but he was paying cash for the house.
He was paying. If you have a lender, the lender requires a lender's insurance policy, not an owner's policy.
Yeah.
But in Connecticut, the difference between a lender's policy and an owner's policy is nominal. So once you're getting the lender's policy, it's just a no-brainer to get the owner's policy.
Yeah, I thought that was very odd at the time, you know. But I guess they thought it wasn't. I mean, is it expensive?
It depends on the purchase price of the house, and it's all based on, or the building. It's all based on price.
Okay.
But it's a one-time fee.
One time, that's it.
That's it.
Yeah, but it's well worth the insurance.
Well worth the insurance.
And in effect, it's an insurance policy, in effect.
That's right. It's an insurance policy on the title to the property.
Yeah. So now, commercial properties, we're learning they're much different than real estate, than residential.
Commercial properties, as soon as you get a realtor, because you decide you want to get a commercial property, you call the bank, you call the attorney, everybody's got to work together from day one.
Day one, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, my experience, Manny, with the people I've worked with has always been good, I have to say. They've been excellent, you know. Time-wise, yeah, sometimes it could take a little more time than you like, but what are you going to do?
Well, and it depends on the type of deal, Larry. So if you're buying a raw piece of land, 80 acres, and you want to put 80 houses on there, you have to go through what's called a approval process with the town. You can't just buy a piece of property and start building on it.
Planning and zoning.
So a lot of times those contracts will have a contingency where the buyer says, I'll buy your property, but only if I get the approvals from the town.
Yes.
Those contracts, you might sign a contract today and close in 24 months because the buyer's not going to close until he has his approvals.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't get his approvals, he can terminate the contract.
You know, I've seen a lot of different things. I've been involved where people wanted to buy property, like you're saying, but only wanted to pay at certain points after they develop. Not the whole thing up front.
Oh, yeah. Well, I did one that was called a lot release basis.
Yeah.
Where say you're the owner of the property, Larry, and I'm buying it from you.
Yep.
And I say, Larry, if I get 30 lots, for every lot I get, I'm going to pay you $100,000.
Yeah.
And every time I sell a lot, you get a check. But it may take me 4 or 5 years to sell out on all those houses, and you have to wait.
Yeah. I've been involved in that kind of thing, which I was involved in a property years back where they wanted to build housing for the elderly, but they wanted to do one section here and pay for it. Do another section, pay for it. Yeah. The people would balk at it, which didn't make sense to me, because in reality, it's better to do that than not do nothing.
Well, on a real estate transaction like that, Larry, both the buyer and the seller need to be a little flexible.
Oh, sure they do. You know, people are misinformed that they think every time you buy something, it's got to be paid for right off the bat, and that's not the case in some cases.
Depends. Every transaction's different.
Everyone's different. Right. Yeah. And the next question I have for you: what happens, Manny? Now, would you represent somebody if somebody has to be evicted?
Oh, so
either commercial or residential.
So I don't do evictions.
Okay.
But you shouldn't try to do your own eviction. You should get a lawyer to help you do an eviction, especially on the commercial ones, and even the residential. Because if you miss the process, or you don't do something correctly, the case could get thrown out and you got to start over.
Oh boy. So is this something your office, do you do them?
We don't.
No, you don't do them?
No.
Okay. But you do foreclosures, though?
No, we don't do foreclosures.
Oh, you don't?
We'll represent someone who's buying a foreclosure.
But not selling?
But I won't foreclose a property.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Yes.
Yeah. Because that's another part of... and I'm sure the people that are specialized in that field.
There's a certain number of attorneys in Connecticut that are going to do all the foreclosures. Yeah.
The other thing, Manny, that I don't know if you get involved with or not, land leases. Do you get involved in that?
Sometimes. They're not as common as regular residential purchases, but sometimes we do get involved in land leases.
What I've noticed, because lately we had a client that was going to sell a gas station. And what I've noticed, some of the gas stations today from the big companies are land leases. I don't know why.
I don't get involved too much in that. I see it more on the mobile homes and things like that.
Yeah.
But I don't really get into the gas stations. That's more specialized.
Yeah, it was very interesting, though. I had no idea that, like, big gas companies, Sunoco and, just for an example, Exxon, they literally go in and have a land lease to run and put a gas station on it. To me, well, there must be something to it.
It's probably for liability or something, so they would rather lease the land for 50 or 100 years than own the land.
Than own it, yeah.
And sometimes the seller wants that because with a land lease, the seller's going to get paid the rental value of that land for a period of time.
Yeah. I'm sure it's...
And then at the end of the lease, everything reverts back to the owner of the land.
Yeah, I'm sure it's worthwhile because people wouldn't do it unless it was worthwhile money-wise, you know. Well, Manny, I tell you, I learned a few things tonight I never knew.
That's great.
And it was good to reminisce on some of the old things we did. And of course, when you're having fun, time flies. And we're going to have to call it a night tonight.
Wow.
I want to thank you for being
Larry.
here. You know, it's really special to have you here. I'm glad you came. And I'm sure the viewers got more out of this than me even, because you're very knowledgeable of what you do.
Thank you, Larry.
And I'm very impressed as far as, I didn't believe you. Your office is that big, number one.
Yeah. Well, our office, we have, 8 people besides myself. We speak Italian, we speak Spanish, and we're busy.
Yeah, wow. So things are good.
Things are good.
Well, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you, the viewers, for watching the show tonight. And just remember this, you saw it first on Racing in Action Today Talk Series. I want to thank you and good night. This program is brought to you in part by Just Results Weight Loss Center in Berlin, Connecticut.
Nick Augustino right here at the East Side Restaurant. We always have the complete full dinner menu. Knockwurst, bratwurst, sauerbraten, potato pancakes, red cabbage, rice pudding, cream pies, all the desserts that Germany had to offer. I always do something different. Yes, I do. I brought seafood to the beer garden at the East Side Restaurant. East Side Restaurant, your German destination restaurant in Connecticut. Tiki-taka, hoy, hoy, hoy!